Hello everyone. Welcome to our today's live stream, the Kotlin Multiplatform Contest Live Q&A. I'm Ksenia Schneeves, Kotlin Education Advocate at JetBrains, and I'm here today with Pamela Hill and Márton Braun, who are Kotlin Multiplatform experts and developer advocates at JetBrains. So we're here today not only to answer your questions, but also to demo the Kotlin multi-platform technology, to answer your questions about the contest itself, and to give you a sneak peek of the wonderful prize there is for the contest. So if we could just quickly play the video of what this year's Kotlin Conf was like, that would be great. Hello again. Hello, people. I see people joining us. So, what's going on here? Just before we dive into the demos and technical demonstration, I'll just say a few words about the Kotlin Multi-Platform Contest. It's the contest sponsored by the Kotlin Foundation, and it's running for the third time now. It's the third year that we're holding the contest for students and recent graduates. The goal of the contest is to bring beginners and students into the Kotlin multi-platform development, to teach them this really marketable skill and popular technology. And so we're here to help you participants and our viewers to get a grasp of Kotlin multi-platform and to see what you can build with the technology. And especially we're here for the contest participants or potential participants. So anyone who's over 18 years old and is a student or is a recent graduate, they're very welcome to take part. And yeah, the submission process is also pretty straightforward. People need to create a Kotlin multi-platform app. It needs to run on at least two platforms. So it can be Android, iOS, desktop, web, and you still have plenty of time. The deadline is January 14th next year. And before that, we're going to be here helping you out during this Q&A session today and in our Slack channel. If you open the page that we're showcasing now, it's also in the description to this video. It's kotlinconf.com/contest. You'll see the link in the description to the video. You can see full rules, complete rules, and all of the forms needed to submit the project. It's actually pretty easy. All you need is just to submit a link to GitHub with a comprehensive README file that helps us, the judges, to understand what features your app, your project has, and how the Kotlin multi-platform technology is used there. So you can be creative and do some pretty cool things. And I think that's it for this part. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We'll be taking them as we go. And now I think I can hand it over to Márton and Pamela.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Ksenia was saying, Martin and I were thinking of the common errors that people make while creating their projects. And one thing that I can think of is, of course, that it must be a new project. So it has to start from the starting date of the competition onwards, but it can't be an old project that you're sort of reworking now. Also, it's only supposed to be you working on that project, no collaborators. And also, please don't plagiarize. Please don't copy other people's ideas and other people's code in your projects. That way, we keep it all above board. Martin, any from your side?
Yeah, I think up next we can talk a bit about what you win if you succeed in the contest. So we have 3 winners each year. So 3 submissions and 3 people. And you get a trip to that year's Kotlin Conf, right? Which I think we can all we can all talk a lot about the Kotlin Conf experience. Obviously, it's the Kotlin event of the year. It's an official conference by JetBrains. It's getting larger each and every year. So next year we're looking at 2,500 people now in Copenhagen. And yeah, I mean, there's so much happening. We have all of the talks across all of the tracks. We have the sponsor booth where you can engage with a lot of the companies who are involved in the community, whether that's JetBrains, Google, other foundation members. You have all kinds of activities, some of which we've seen in the intro video here. So we had the coding in the dark challenge at last Kotlin Conf, which was very successful, so that you could test your coding skills live. We had the party, of course, which some people, I'm sure, is the reason why they're joining Kotlin Conf. Yeah, what else?
Yeah, actually, even if you don't win a trip, every eligible submission, every person behind it will receive some neat prizes, some Kotlin and JetBrains swag. So yeah, it's really worth taking part to learn the technology, to have this 100% chance of winning some swag and a pretty good chance of winning one of the 3 trips to Kotlin Conf sponsored by the Kotlin Foundation, including the conference ticket, the accommodation, flights, taxis to and from the airport. So it's pretty cool.
Right. So perhaps you're wondering, how do you actually get started? So it's actually quite easy. There is a wizard that you can use, and Martin will display on the screen for us a wizard that you can get, and all the links that we're going to be sharing will be on the description at the end of the presentation, as well as Ksenia is going to be adding the specific links to each one of them in the chat as we go along. So we have this Kotlin multi-platform wizard that allows you to create KMP projects from scratch, or at least from a good base point. And as you can scroll down, you can see that you can create projects that have Android, iOS, desktop, and web sort of targets. And there's also, like, you can also have the server. You can, for example, share data models between your server and your clients and so on. So you can also use Compose multi-platform. It's highly recommended, because then you don't really have to learn Swift or Swift UI. So the way that you do that is, for example, if you want to share between Android, iOS, and desktop, you just ensure that iOS is selected with Share UI. If you want to have a native UI for iOS, you just say Do not share UI. Simple as that. And then at the bottom, you just generate it. It will download onto your machine, and you can just open it up. Martin, do you want to take us through what tools you can use, what IDEs or code editors?
Yes, so our main focus with Kotlin multi-platform tooling is currently Fleet, which is where we are adding all of the things around supporting Compose multi-platform, for example. So thinking of things like previews for UI development, or support for working with Compose resources. as simply as possible. So we're putting those multi-platform tooling efforts into Fleet, which is currently in public preview. And you can grab this from JetBrains Toolbox, which is a launcher for all of your various JetBrains IDEs. And yeah, you can use that to load one of the projects from the wizard.
Yeah. If you want to start learning more about how it actually works, there are two sort of getting started tutorials. One with just Kotlin Multiplatform, so sharing business logic, and then another one where it is sharing both logic and UI. And there's pretty simple to go through step by step. It will explain for you how to set up your environment, how to create your apps with the wizard, how to how the project looks and how to get to the right places to add your code, how to run things, all those things. So it's a pretty neat little tutorial for on the KMP side, where you access some platform specific code and you show it on the screen along with a little animation. And for Compose, it's also pretty neat. But there is also another tutorial that is a little bit more extensive, and that is our sort of like our space launches tutorial, which is the KTOR and SQLite tutorial. So this is a more extensive tutorial where you basically retrieve a bunch of SpaceX's launch data, and then you display it. You retrieve it, you save it in a little database, a SQLite database, and using SQLite, and then you display it on the screen, and then it will have a little bit of caching there for you with the localized data.
Yeah, and just highlighting that we had that choice earlier between the two like initial tutorials, one with native UI and one with Compose. That of course highlights one of the big benefits of using Kotlin Multiplatform, that you get to choose which part of your applications you share. So usually with these applications that we're discussing, we would always share the business logic, but even within that, you have the flexibility of scaling from a small bit of shared code to sharing all of your business logic. And then the same goes for the UI layer of your application. So you can have fully native UI, which I assume the contest rules allow. Someone can double check me on that, but I assume that still counts. And on the other hand, you can also have fully shared UI if you do everything using Compose Multiplatform.
So we have some samples that you can go and have a look at. So it is both JetBrains samples as well as other community contributors. I would really recommend having a look at John O'Reilly's samples. He's got People in Space, Confetti, which is like a little conference app, and so on. These will give you a good idea of what a good architecture looks like. And what how to do certain things. Usually these are very sort of connect to an API kind of and display kind of applications. But there are other tutorials that are more involved, like the TV app one is also a lot more involved. And I would definitely recommend that you have a look at all those samples. There's some with interesting architecture, some with very traditional architecture, but good practices. And all of them are really, really nice. So have a look at those samples.
And as you can see, this samples page in the Kotlin Multiplatform Development Portal is pretty searchable. It has lists of what these samples actually share using KMP. They have a list of libraries and technologies used in each of the projects. And we can also look at, for example, what the UI solution is in a given sample. So if you've decided to go down a specific path, where you're looking for some real life examples of using a specific library, for example, something like Kotlin serializations for parsing data in KMP, then you can take a look at this page, search for that technology, and probably find appropriate samples that way.
So if you're lazy like me, you'll probably want to do something like Compose Multiplatform, where you get double the bang because you get your UI, you get to share your UI on Android, iOS, and all those other platforms almost for free. But you do have to know Compose. Now, there is a good resource for it by Google on how to learn Jetpack Compose. So Jetpack Compose is a technology by Google, and it is just a way to write intuitive APIs for displaying UI on Kotlin on Android. There is another technology by JetBrains, however, called Compose Multiplatform, which runs your compose code, your UI creating code on a multi-platform sort of basis. So there is it. You can create UIs for Android, iOS, desktop, and web, and the code looks very much similar to your Android code. There's just different, There's small differences in between Jetpack Compose and Compose Multiplatform. But they're really minimal, and you'll see them as you do the tutorials. So
Yeah,
there are
for
some.
go ahead.
So there are a few tutorials on the Google site, and there's also some samples that you can have a look at.
Yeah, so exactly because we are building on top of Jetpack Compose with all this, the code, the declarative approach, and a vast majority of the APIs is going to be the same. There are some platform specifics. If you want to, for example, mix your native iOS UI with Compose UI in various ways, nesting them in either way possible. Or if you're working on a desktop target, for example, and you want to do very desktop specific things like open multiple windows for your application, we do have some extra APIs there for Compose. But again, all of the core APIs you can learn from any resource that teaches Jetpack Compose. So whether it's layout, modifiers, styling of components, animations, all of the core concepts around state handling, all of these things will transfer one-to-one between Jetpack Compose and Compose Multiplatform. So if you already have the Android skills, for example, you can, of course, reuse all of that on Compose Multiplatform as well.
Okay, I saw that there are a few questions there. Ksenia, are there any questions that are related to our competition that you'd like to answer, or anything for me and Márton?
So we got two questions related to the technology, so maybe we can start answering those. I'll feature the first one on screen. So can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the question is about when we're going to add backhandler navigation for iOS. So the navigation library for Compose Multiplatform is based on the Jetpack Compose navigation component for Compose. So this is one of the many different libraries that was originally available on Android and is now available for multi-platform use. And the iOS part of this is definitely a work in progress. So backhandler, for example, is something like that we know about. We don't have any concrete response or timeline for it, but that is something that's on our roadmap, as well as, for example, supporting deep links on iOS is something that is often requested. But all of the core things of navigation have already been ported to multi-platform. So you can create destinations, you can navigate between them, you can customize the animations between these destinations. You even have typed navigation, which is one of the newer features in Compose navigation that we're now using in most of our samples as well. So we are moving all of these things to multi-platform. We're already there with a lot of them. The rest are in progress, but we do know about them.
So yeah, maybe that's to follow up on the previous comment, update on the KMP Compose navigation for iOS.
Yes, I think we've addressed this in the same question. Stay tuned with the release notes of Compose Multiplatform on GitHub. and you'll see as the navigation library is being bumped to new versions and as we're adding new features. And with these more important features, you'll also certainly see them in the release blog posts for Compose as they come out.
So the second one would be about campaign, like sharing the logic, but when we integrate MinW or Linux platform, the things are not working as expected. How to share resources or embed resources.
I think the best would be to actually ask in the Kotlin Lang Slack channel. I don't have a specific answer. I think I'm not sure. Márton, do you perhaps know if Ming is supported right now, or if it's in that tier?
I think we might have had support for it at some point. I don't know which platform the question is referencing exactly, because I know that some like very niche ones have been deprecated.
Or not? Yeah.
At some point, but I mean, Windows and Linux are generally supported for sure with native targets. Of course, we do have a tiered approach, as you mentioned, for native targets. So some of them are more heavily supported than others. For the specific resource question, I don't think I don't have an answer off the top of my head. So going to the Slack channel is definitely a good call. We do have resource support for Compose specifically, but on desktop, Compose Multiplatform is primarily targeting the JVM. So for native resources, that would be a slightly different approach.
All right.
And just a reminder that you only have to support two of your two platforms in your competition submission, two or more. more is fun, but two platforms are what is required for the competition.
Yeah, actually, that's what the next question is about a specific theme for the app, for the contest. So we would want to see your creativity and the way how you can use the technology and how you can show off of what Kotlin Multiplatform is capable of. So there were apps in the previous years covering completely different topics. And I think what matters is the idea behind it and the way it uses the technology.
Yeah. While we're here, I think we can
go ahead,
also take a brief look at the previous winners, for example, from last year. So these winners and their apps are also listed on the contest website. So I encourage everyone to have a look at these. As requested by the rules, these have to be open source. So they are all published on GitHub. So you can take a look at each of these projects, clone them, try running them, and see what topics people have tackled.
Yeah, and the winners of last year's competition really did cover a wide variety of ideas, from College Advisor, which helps high school students to determine what college is affordable for them to go to for a particular major. Organics that worked with farming, the farming community. It worked offline, and it also used some Gemini AI to help farmers diagnose different diseases in their maybe their crops or their chickens or their livestock's to diagnose certain diseases for them. And Caleb had a Pixley image sort of editor that was very very performant, and it had some other ideas behind it that were more technical, but it was a very interesting implementation. So for me, when I go into like evaluating a project idea, I really like what Ksenia said. We want you to be creative about it, and what I really found really impressive with the winners of last year is how they took something from their environment, something that they like doing. Like Caleb really likes doing image processing, and Patsy also really, she was thinking about what is in her environment that she can solve a problem for. I would suggest that you do something that is more than just a fetch, store, and displaying of data. And think about, what interest do I have that would make a difference in your life or in your community, or maybe your previous, your, a few years ago would have made a difference in your life. So I would really suggest that you really just let your mind go, be creative, and try and find an idea that will stand out.
Yeah, and while we're at the previous winners, it's also worth mentioning that you get to have really nice conversations at the event with both JetBrains and Google folks. Like, we always have this little conversation organized with the winners, and from our side, it's great to see people passionate about Kotlin Multiplatform who built these cool apps. And who are at the beginning of their careers, but they're already looking at the technology. There's usually a lot of like wisdom passed on by people who are already in their established careers about how they got there. A lot of like nice story time. So those are all benefits that you can get by winning this contest.
Career conversations, yes.
Yeah, and we're now running a poll on YouTube about our audience. So 42% are not Kotlin multi-platform contest participants. 40% of our viewers now are thinking about it, and we have 19% who are actually participants of the contest. So, folks, it's your chance to ask Pamela and Márton the technical questions. If you have already started working on your project and encountered some difficulties, now it's your chance to ask the questions. And meanwhile, I'll feature another question about the judging criteria. So we've briefly touched on this already, and actually not briefly, but pretty well covered. But I can also add that we do check the code quality and the novelty of the idea, and of course the usage of Kotlin multi-platform. Uh, so let's move on to some other questions. I'm featuring.
Ksenia, can I quickly interrupt about code? I want to just touch on code quality. So, when we evaluate a project, we're going to do a mini code review, and we have a look at whether you follow your Kotlin code conventions. You have to follow those; those are very important. But once you sort of know them, it's going to help you in the rest of your career, because it's very sort of logical, stylistic choices. It's not anything that is like difficult to remember. And also your IDE is going to help you in most cases to get the spacing right, to get the indentations right, and so on. So about using Compose multi-platform, it is a plus to use it, and it also is going to be faster for you to code it. But if you decide that you want to do maybe on iOS, you want to do Swift and Swift UI, that's also fine. Or on the other platforms, do something else. But it's also really important to make good library choices. So you shouldn't be using expect actual when there's actually a good library available. And there are, of course, many different libraries available. There is one resource called KMP Awesome that we want to share with you, where it's just like a long it's a long repository of all kinds of awesome like KMP libraries. It's got things like image stuff and storage and analytics and Firebase things, and just almost everything that you want is in there. There is, of course, also the Google repositories of that they've sort of ported to multi-platform, and we're going to have a look at that one now. So those are the Kotlin multi-platform libraries that Google has ported to multi-platform from Android. We have a data store, lifecycle, view model would be there as well, paging, room, and so on. Yeah. So those
and
are
all of
the.
this.
Mhm.
Sorry. So all of this really speaks to the Kotlin multi-platform ecosystem that's already there for you to use. So while we do have the ability for you to bridge out into native code and write platform-specific implementations if needed to access some kind of native APIs, and Kotlin multi-platform actually makes that fairly easy. You don't have to do that for most common tasks at this point because, yeah, as you can see from this repository, whether you're looking to do a network call, store some data, add analytics, do some testing, do dependency injection, like across all of these categories, there are existing libraries in the ecosystem. And at this point, most of them are pretty well established. So for most of these common things, we have 1, 2, 3 very popular libraries probably that you can pick from, depending on mostly stylistic choices between the two, like top popular candidates.
Yeah, and another thing to remember about code quality is that your code looks neat. There's no commented out code that still needs to be removed, and everything is properly formatted. That's just like a hint and a tip there for you about how we do code reviews.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. So I'll feature the next question about the handler for iOS in Compose Multiplatform.
I think we've handled this already. I would suggest they just have a look at the earlier part in the recording when it comes out, because we've handled this, and it's basically just that it's basically on our backlog, right, Márton?
Yes, this is something that we know about and it will eventually arrive.
All right, then the next one.
So the question is how Kotlin can invoke Swift objects in iOS main KTS. Okay, so my understanding is we're asking. I don't know if this is exactly what is being asked, but how does if the question is how do we access platform specific stuff in iOS main KTS, in the code in the source set for iOS main. If the question is how do you access it, there's basically like bindings for UIKit and for Metal and so on that have been created, but you can also create your own bindings. And the ones that have created for you, like I said, UIKit and so on, are out of the box. You don't have to do anything to do that. But there is a little bit of configuration that you have to do in order to be able to access other other libraries from iOS main, other Swift libraries from iOS main. Now, this is not the same as in the other direction where we're going from Swift to Kotlin, where we have that Objective-C bridge. So it is, it's actually almost more common to go from Swift to Kotlin rather from Kotlin to Swift almost, because in general you want to integrate the multi-platform libraries in your apps and so on like that. But if you do want to use expect actual and you want to use platform code, then either you have to use the bindings that exists already, and then you just have to look up the platform APIs for yourself, or you have to make sure that you've got the configuration in your build.gradle.kts files.
So I was featuring the next comment from the same viewer about comparison of Kotlin to Swift. And we also got a couple more questions about a specific place to share the project. So as we mentioned in the beginning, there is the contest page. It's linked to the description of this video. It's kotlinconf.com/contest. You can see a special form there, which is needed to submit your project. And another question is about sharing the GitHub link regarding this CMP. Actually, CMP, I think our proper abbreviation is KMP. That's what is meant.
CMP is Compose Multiplatform, and KMP is Kotlin Multiplatform.
All right. So,
Yeah. So
how
this question is about, I think, about what I mentioned about like keeping an eye out for new versions of Compose multiplatform for like navigation updates and things like that. So a good place for that is the GitHub repository. I've linked this in the chat in the meantime. So it's just the JetBrains / Compose multiplatform repository. And there on the releases page, you can see the release notes of both the Compose plugin itself and then all of these accompanying libraries like navigation and lifecycle and so on. And of course, the JetBrains blog always has an update blog post as well, where you would catch the major announcements and new features.
All right, one more question.
I'm not 100% sure what this question is, but what is asking. But so the question is, why actual expect exists in the time we have interfaces with different implementations in Android main and iOS main. So in general, so when we started out with the wizard, when it was still part of Android Studio, we had an implementation that was not an interface. It was something else. It was I think it was like a expect actual class. We actually recommend that in general you use something like expect actual function for very simple cases, or an interface with a class different class implementations, and then different ways to add or to pass that implementation onto the application, like expect actual factory functions, like dependency injection, or different points. So those are that's the different ways that you can actually go ahead and have interfaces with different implementations in Android main and iOS main. But so in general, for a simple case, you would use expect actual, or even better, you could use a multi-platform library. But for the implementations, it can also be just an interface, and then the implementations in Android main or iOS main or desktop main or whatever. And then the interface has to somehow get into the application. It has to be injected, or there has to be a factory function of some kind.
Yeah, I think this shows how you have multiple different approaches that you can use, and you have some flexibility in how you design exactly your bridging to native APIs. So you can have, for a lot of simple cases, it's easiest to create an expect actual function so that you can just call into it from common code, and then it can perform its own platform specific logic as required. But then as you are building more complex things, you can choose to build this up into interfaces and objects. And you could, for example, have a common interface implemented with different implementations on all of your platforms, and then maybe pass in that platform specific implementation with an initializer or something when you set up your application, and pass it into common code like that. And then you would avoid the expect actual mechanism altogether. But yeah, I mean, there are so many conversations to be had around preferences of configuring dependencies and architecting this part of your project. But I think like all of the various options should be possible with a KMP setup.
Okay, thanks. Another question from a person just joining the live stream about the rules of eligibility for the contest. So the detailed rules are on the contest page, and there are there is a shorter version of the rules right on the contest page, but then there is a button, and underneath the button you can see a very detailed list of rules. And please make sure to read this, because there are some different, peculiar, unexpected things on who can take part related to law. So please do read this whole thing. And about the accreditation of educational programs, this is mostly a requirement because we would like students and beginners to take part in the contest and win the trip to Kotlin Conf, rather than people who are already probably working and take courses at some bootcamp or online platform. So that's why we want students from accredited educational institutions to take part, or those who have recently graduated, recently meaning within the past 12 months from the date when the contest started. So it was in September. So if you graduated last September, you're fine to take part in the contest. And yeah, the university courses do not need to include Kotlin or Compose. You are totally welcome to learn this on your own. But if you would like to include Kotlin in your courses, you're also very welcome to reach out to us, to me, and we can talk to your university and professor, because we do have an entire Kotlin course prepared for educators, which they can just take and start teaching at their academic institution.
Yeah, I can also bring this up real quick on the screen share. So if you go to kotlinlang.org/education, you have all of these different resources for teaching here. And I believe we also have things such as this wonderful map, which shows just how many different institutions already teach Kotlin in one course or another.
Yes, thanks for featuring this page. I've sent the link to the page in the chat. And we also have another question about using native Windows UI like iOS in the future.
I think the question has to do with whether I assume this is for Compose multi-platform, whether it will have a iOS look in the future. And there is, if you want your app to look, your iOS app or your Kotlin multi-platform and Compose multi-platform app to look like a iOS app, there is a Cupertino almost like skinning theme that you can get from the community in order to be able to have it look like that in the future.
Yes, I'm also not 100% sure of the exact question here, but also if you're asking about whether you can build native Windows UI on top of shared Kotlin code, then yes, that's possible to do. You can create a native Kotlin library that has business logic, and then use that in a Windows application. Although it's definitely not one of the main use cases, but it's technically possible.
All right, so that was the last question for now. Do we have anything else to showcase?
No, just a mention of our Slack. I want to mention the Slack channels that we have available. So there is a way to, we have a Kotlin Lang's Slack channel where you can sign up for it, and there is so many people that are able to help you there. People from JetBrains, people from Google, different community contributors, different people that are just. There's also there's a like a hash multi-platform channel, and there's also the Kotlin contest channel, the Kotlin multi-platform contest channel, where you can ask us specifically. We'll kind of be roaming around there for a while, so you can ask us questions there if you're part of the competition. There's, for example, compose-iOS for trying to understand various issues regarding having Compose multi-platform on iOS, on the iOS target, and all those kinds of things. It's a wonderful resource.
All right, thank you. So let's give a couple more minutes to the viewers for some last minute questions. I think we've covered all of the questions for now. So we have a comment about Slack to prove Pamela's point, and yes, we are all here at the channel Kotlin multiplatform contest on Kotlin Lang Slack workspace. If you haven't joined this workspace yet, please do so. There are, I think, about 70,000 people, a lot of different channels, Kotlin community related, Kotlin in general related, on all topics you can possibly imagine. So yeah, we get some comments. I see that.
And more generally about Slack, with each of the like technology specific channels. So whether it's for Compose for a specific platforms, or for something like coroutines and so on, you can find a lot of JetBrains people in general who should be able to help you out. This also includes people who are working on specific libraries that you can easily reach through this community Slack. And of course, a lot of the community members who are building these great libraries can also be found there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true. So we have another comment backing up the previously featured question about using native Windows UI like iOS in the future. Does this comment make it more clear?
Yes, I take this as the native Windows app that includes Kotlin multiplatform shared logic. I think that's the question then, and yeah, it should be technically possible. I have no idea if we have a sample of that, maybe, but it's definitely one of the more difficult interrupt scenarios, because it's not one of the primary focuses of Kotlin native. But we certainly support building libraries, and you can export it with into something like a DLL for native use. But I cannot comment on in detail on what the experience is like. But I do encourage you to try it, and if anything doesn't work, report it, because I think in theory it should be feasible.
All right, thank you. So I think we've got all of our questions. I see one person commenting that their question is getting filtered out here on YouTube. So please join Slack. Please leave your question there. We'll be there. We'll be there regularly. We respond regularly to the questions. Okay, I think we're taking the last one. It just appeared, and we're wrapping up. So the last one.
Okay, so this is definitely not a student competition question. So the question has to do with whether Compose multi-platform can be used with Firebase, and yes, it can, or at least KMP can be used with Firebase. There are different modules for it, and you can see it in that KMP-awesome repository. I'm not going to answer whether you should use Flutter. I think I'm going to stay on the safe team. But Compose multi-platform is definitely getting there, and it's definitely it's Compose multi-platform is currently tough for iOS. And we're definitely working very, very hard on getting it stable. It's already stable for desktop and Android. WASM is sort of coming up quite fast as well. So, yeah, I'm not going to say anything about Flutter. Okay, thank you.
I mean, if you're asking us, obviously we'll tell you to use Kotlin Multiplatform, but you should, but you should also research like all of your different options for. In terms of stability, right? So we're coming up on a year of Kotlin Multiplatform itself being stable and production ready. We have a lot of very successful usages of it by various large companies in production. So we know that the technology itself works great. We have just mentioned the stability of Compose Multiplatform, but even though it's still in beta on iOS, it is already being used again in production as well. Some people have had it deployed before we announced its alpha, so
Yes.
we can always see stories like that. And I wanted to make a quick note on the Firebase part that there is no official KMP library for Firebase, but there is a community project which, as I understand, covers a decent amount of the APIs that you might want to use. It depends on which packages you need, but the most common things that people use, like the authentication and analytics parts, those should be there. And there is a petition somewhere, which I think you should be able to find by Googling, which is about asking Google themselves to add first-party Kotlin multi-platform support to Firebase libraries. And I know that there are at least hundreds of people in our community who have like signed that petition and who would really like to see that from Google. So I do encourage you to let them know if you want to see more KMP support in Google libraries.
All right, great. Thank you. Now let's wrap it up. And thank you so much, Pamela and Márton, for your expertise, for sharing your answers to the questions. Maybe we can wrap up with the last thing you can give as a piece of advice to our viewers about their submissions to the contest, or some piece of motivation.
I think I'll share that a really good README is not just a good idea. It helps the competition organizers and the evaluators really understand your idea. It helps them understand that what your thought process was, and it really helps to evaluate it better. If you've got videos, I would definitely include those of your apps running and performing well. Installation instructions, all those things are so important. But my inspirational thing is just, I wish there was a competition like this when I was a student. I'm not sure if I would have had the guts, but please have more guts than I would have had to enter the competition, to join us in Denmark, in Copenhagen next year, and to come have a fun time with us.
Thank you, Márton.
Yeah, and before we close off, I would bring it back to the motivation part. KotlinConf is an amazing event. If you love Kotlin, if you work with Kotlin, if you're interested in all the things that are happening in our ecosystem, as developer advocates, we see a lot of various events and conferences, and of course we love a lot of them. But KotlinConf, I think, is very special to us. Because everyone is there for Kotlin, everyone loves the same thing, and anyone that you can get into a conversation with over like the lunch at the conference by just ending up at the same table will probably have a fun Kotlin related story to share, or like how they use the language, what pet projects they have with Kotlin. It's a fantastic opportunity to see the community in person, especially as a student if you're on the beginning of your career. I mean, if you have just finished university or something like that, you might like get an internship opportunity or something out of it. So yeah, it's a fantastic event, and it's a huge thing to be able to win a trip to it through the contest. So make use of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I second that absolutely. And we thank you all for joining us today. We are looking forward to seeing what you build with Kotlin Multiplatform, and we stay in touch with you in Slack. So see you soon. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.